So picture this: I'm in the middle of a calm Saturday morning, sipping my coffee, planning to finally catch up on some yard work, when suddenly, everything shuts off. I'm talking full power outage. No lights, no fridge, no internet. I check the fuse box. Nothing tripped. I step outside, and that's when I see her, Karen, from the HOA, standing near my power meter, with a smug look and a pair of garden shears. She actually cut my power line, on purpose. And when I asked what on earth she was doing, she crossed her arms and said, "You've been using too much power. It's against HOA rules." I had to do something. Now, at this point, I'm trying to stay calm. But I'm also thinking, you've messed with the wrong person today. See? What Karen didn't know is that I don't just live here. I also own the small substation that powers most of the houses in this neighborhood, including hers. Yep, I inherited it years ago from my uncle, who built it privately before the HOA was even formed. And thanks to a long-standing agreement with the utility company, I'm the one managing it under contract. The funny part? Karen's always been the type to throw around her authority like it's her full-time job, always citing HOA bylaws, nitpicking lawns, sending passive-aggressive letters. But this time, she went too far. Not only did she tamper with private property, but she cut the very line that connects her house to the rest of the grid. Now, here I am, standing in the middle of a quiet street, watching her house go dark to ... And that's when it hit her. The look on her face, priceless. But trust me, that was just the beginning. Because once she found out who really holds the power in this neighborhood, things got way more interesting. Karen stood frozen, garden shears still in hand, watching as her porch lights flickered and died. I didn't say much at first. I just stared at the mess she made. The cable she cut wasn't just any power line. It was one of the main feeds connected to the neighborhood substation. And like I said, I own it. Every transformer, every buried line, every bolt. She had no clue. Now, let me back up for a second. My uncle was an electrical engineer, kind of a genius, but super private. Decades ago, before the HOA was even formed, he bought this land and installed a personal substation. With permission from the city, after he passed, the property and the substation came to me. Most folks don't know it's privately owned because I've kept it low-key. I let the utility company run their inspections and billing, but I handle the maintenance and upgrades myself. It's legal, contracted, and completely separate from the HOA's authority. Karen, of course, never bothered to check facts. She just assumes she runs everything because she's the self-appointed queen of the HOA board. Always walking around with that clipboard, snapping photos of people's trash bins, measuring grass height, you name it. And lately, she's been on a weird crusade about energy abuse, saying some of us are draining too much from the grid, ruining the balance, whatever that means. I mostly ignored her until today, when she literally crossed the line. The neighborhood slowly started waking up to the blackout. People came outside, confused, some checking their phones, others poking at smart thermostats that had gone dead. Meanwhile, Karen tried to act like nothing happened. She mumbled something about a technical correction and walked off, like she didn't just shut down half the block. But what she didn't realize yet was how deep of a mess she'd just stepped into. While Karen tried to slip away, pretending nothing was wrong, neighbors started gathering on the sidewalk. Everyone was confused. Some thought it was just a typical outage. Others were already annoyed, asking if anyone else had lost power. I stayed quiet for a moment, letting Karen think she was off the hook. But I could see her eyes darting around. She knew this wasn't going away quietly. Then one of my neighbors, Paul Hees, a retired firefighter, spoke up. "Was that Karen near the power box earlier? I swear I saw her snipping something." Karen spun around so fast, her fake smile barely holding up. "That was a safety measure," she said, trying to sound official. "Certain homes were drawing Too much power, it's destabilizing the grid. That's when I stepped in and calmly said, "Actually, that line you cut wasn't part of your jurisdiction. It's part of a private system I manage, and your house runs off it too." She froze. A couple neighbors looked at me, confused. I explained just enough for people to understand that the substation on the edge of our neighborhood was privately owned. Had been for years, and it powered over 70% of the block, including Karen's house. Her face turned red. "That can't be legal," she snapped. "The HOA has control over all utility access." "Nope," I said. "The HOA has control over trash pickup and paint colors, not electrical infrastructure." Now there were whispers. A few people started pulling out their phones, checking the HOA bylaws. Some asked me more questions. Others just stared at Karen like she'd gone too far, which she had. But this wasn't just about one power cut. There was something deeper going on. A few weeks ago, I'd started getting anonymous complaints sent through the HOA mailbox, claiming I was abusing infrastructure and threatening unseen consequences if I didn't reduce my usage. Now it made sense. Someone had been planning this, and Karen was just the tip of it by now. The street felt like a scene from a movie. Neighbors whispering, phones out, confused voices mixing with the buzz of frustration. The power was still out, and with the summer heat creeping in, people were getting restless. Karen was trying to keep her cool, but her usual confidence was cracking. She kept insisting she had the authority to regulate neighborhood consumption, but no one was buying it anymore. Behind the scenes, I had already texted the utility rep I work with, explaining the situation. He replied fast. "She cut the main feed. That's tampering. We'll need to report this." My stomach dropped. I knew this wasn't just about a nosy HOA member anymore. Karen's actions were crossing legal lines. Then something really strange happened. While a few of us stood talking near the community sign, Mark, the guy who lives on the corner lot, stepped forward and said, "Actually, Karen's not the only one behind this. She's just been the loudest." Everyone turned toward him. He looked uncomfortable, like he'd been holding something in. He explained that he'd been at a private HOA board meeting a month ago, where a couple members brought up concerns about independent infrastructure being a threat to the neighborhood's consistency. They believed that since I controlled the substation, I could someday monopolize power access or raise rates. Totally baseless, but they ran with it. Apparently, they'd even drafted a motion to force me to hand over management to the HOA or else. And Karen, she took it into her own hands, thinking she'd be the neighborhood hero. That explained the anonymous threats, the fake reports, the buildup. This wasn't random. This was organized. And if they'd gone as far as sabotaging the system, who knew what else they were planning? Then we heard the faint hum of a backup generator kicking in, ... but it wasn't mine. It was Karen's. Her lights flickered back on while the rest of us stayed in the dark. That's when everything snapped into focus and the whole street turned to her in silence. Everyone stood there, stunned, watching Karen's lights flicker to life while the rest of the block stayed in complete blackout. She didn't say a word, just gave the smallest smirk and turned to go back inside like nothing had happened. That's when Paul called out, "Wait, how do you have power right now?" Her shoulders tensed, but she kept walking. About to let that slide, I followed her up the driveway, staying calm but loud enough for others to hear. "Karen, you cut the line that feeds this entire block, including your house. There's no way you should have power unless you've got your own setup. And if you did, why were you using ours in the first place?" That stopped her. She turned, annoyed now. "I installed a backup generator last month, completely legal. Not that it's anyone's business, but something didn't add up. I'd seen the permits issued in our area. Part of my job, managing the grid, meant staying on top of installations. There had been no generator application for her property. I asked her directly, what kind of generator? Where's the exhaust? She opened her mouth, then hesitated. That's when Mark stepped closer and said, her generator's not a generator. I helped her hook it up. She's been drawing backup power from the irrigation pump system behind the clubhouse. It's illegally wired. Now the crowd really started reacting. People were pulling up neighborhood maps on their phones, looking at the layout. That pump system. It's supposed to be dedicated to water, flow, and emergency sprinklers completely, separate from residential power. If Karen had tapped into that without permits, not only was she bypassing usage restrictions, but she was siphoning city-monitored resources for personal use. The same woman lecturing everyone about power fairness had been secretly stealing from the system. This whole time, that's when I realized this wasn't just about the substation anymore. Karen had created her own private network behind everyone's back, and I wasn't the only one she'd tried to sabotage. As the truth sank in, Karen's face shifted from smug to pale. Neighbors started filming, whispering, even shouting. Some were furious they'd been hit with random power surges and outages over the past few weeks and never knew why. Now it was clear Karen's illegal connection to the irrigation system had been draining the backup circuits and causing unstable power flow across several homes. All while she played the victim and blamed others. I pulled up the utility contract from my phone and showed everyone the section confirming my legal ownership of the substation and control over its maintenance. Mark stepped forward again, admitting he'd helped her but didn't know it was tied to city infrastructure. She told me it was a private generator, he said, looking genuinely guilty. I wouldn't have touched it otherwise. By now, the utility rep had arrived. He'd come to inspect the cut lines, but walked into the middle of a neighborhood firestorm. After hearing everything, he made a quick call and told Karen she was going to be reported for tampering with municipal systems and electrical theft. The HOA board members who backed her quietly slipped away while the rest of the street watched her lose all credibility in real time. Karen tried to spin it, blaming miscommunication, good intentions, and even claimed she thought she was helping the neighborhood, but no one bought it. The irony was too thick. She tried to shut down my power, only to expose the very illegal setup she was running all along, as the substation was safely restored and power returned to the block. I thought it was finally over until I got a call the next morning from the city. Turns out, during the inspection, they found a hidden relay buried behind Karen's shed, wired directly into my substation feed. She hadn't just cut the power, she'd been quietly rerouting it to herself for months, and just like that, the story wasn't just about an entitled HOA member anymore. It was about full-on power theft, okay? And who really controlled the current in this neighborhood? The city's investigation moved quickly after they uncovered the buried relay. Karen had been rerouting power from the substation for nearly 6 months, which explained the mysterious billing discrepancies and the occasional flickers some neighbors had reported. Once the evidence was documented, she was hit with fines for electrical theft and property tampering. The city also demanded she disconnect all unauthorized wiring and attend a compliance hearing. She tried to deflect the blame, but with so many witnesses and clear proof, there wasn't much she could do. The HOA board, under pressure from angry residents, voted to remove Karen from her position. They also announced a review of their rules to prevent any board member from overstepping their bounds again. A new president was elected, someone far more reasonably, and for the first time in a while, the neighborhood actually felt like a community again. Mark apologized in person and even offered to help me with future maintenance around the substation. I appreciated that. He wasn't a bad guy, just misled. And the rest of the neighbors, they rallied. We set up a town hall, discussed better transparency between utility services and the HOA, and agreed to communicate more before jumping to conclusions. In the end, Karen's obsession with control led to her own downfall. She tried to cut my power without realizing I literally owned the grid she depended on. And by the time the truth came out, her web of lies had short-circuited everything she thought she controlled. It was never about revenge for me. It was about fairness, respect, and keeping people honest, especially when they hold positions of influence. So, if there's one lesson in all this, it's simple. Don't mess with what you don't understand, especially when the wires you're cutting are connected to your own house.